It's on the way.
So yes, today, so this is a work in progress by Dr. Ali Teymoori from University of Bergen, talking about extreme resistance under extreme digital surveillance in the case of the warehouse working environment. We will have about 15 to 20 minutes of the talk, and then the rest of the time open for discussion and questions. So just we're looking for general feedback on this direction in Dr. Teymoori's research, and would be grateful for any feedback that you might have. So without further ado, I think we can get started. So take it away, Ali.
Yep, thanks everyone for joining wherever you are. So I'm just going to mention that Amin is also in the room. Amin and I are doing this research together. And at the beginning, it started about the working experience on the new forms of labor. But then we got interested into forms of resistance that we consider to be a very oppressive form of labor. How workers would resist. So I'm gonna share my screen and see. Do you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So the title of the talk is Resistance Under Extreme Digital Surveillance, the case of warehouse working environments. At the beginning, I'm going to give a little bit of theoretical context and then move to the context of the research, which is warehouse working environment, and then present some pilot data we have so far. And then I'll be interested to hear your feedback and look forward for the discussion. So the book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff came out in 2019 and presented a very grim picture of the type of capitalism we have today. And there was a specific focus on the way that individuals are constructed in this new form of capitalism. And she called it the emergence of a new type of psychological individuality, an ideology of atomized individuals sentenced to perpetual competition for scarce resources. And that brings a cult of entrepreneurship. So in a sense that individuals should be the owner and manager of their own selves. And that ownership of their own selves should be in a way such as a unit of capital, a unit of entrepreneur. And then so they should be in constant competition with each other for a better value, so to say. And what she considered this model of psychological individuality, saying that it's a very strong Skinnerian model of behavior engineering. So the way it captures a lot of experiential data and turns it into prediction model, and through that tries to change individuals' behavior. And the way it works is that, so it's basically a Skinnerian model, saying that get rid of the mental. It doesn't matter what the person thinks or consider himself or herself to be, but only the observed behavior is important. Skinner considered the sense of self, freedom, dignity to be an illusion. And the only thing that matters is the space that exists between individual and the environment, and how that space can be used in order to manage individual behavior. So it's a form of combining technology and behaviorism. So individuals' experience is a source of raw data. It's been whatever behavior footprint we have in online world, or also whatever we have in throughout technical devices like phone, or through the information that captured by surveillance devices, will be used into machine intelligence and prediction model products. So the behavior, what she calls the behavior surplus model, is that whatever we leave behind that can be captured through technologies or the like phone or internet or whatever, then it be used to control individuals' future behavior. So what we are interested is that the psychology behind this way of controlling human behavior, and what would be the consequences of surveillance devices, which are extremely sort of, effective in capturing the selfless behavior or this behavior footprints, and how that can be used, sort of, what the consequences of this would be for individuals, and what are the possibilities for individuals to resist when they are working in heavily surveilled working environment. So the general research questions is that the new forms of labor that we witness, especially after the pandemic, such as online commerce and such as bicycle messengers, home officing, etc., and also the form of the labor that we see in gig economy. What are the phenomenological and psychological effects of these new forms of labor on the workers? We're also interested in the objective and precarious work conditions influencing the working day experience, and how do workers relate to the digitally mediated communication through platforms or scanners, and how they relate to this ideology of being an entrepreneurial employee in gig economy. But what important for our presentation today is that how workers in heavily surveilled environment resist oppressive working conditions. So that's the theoretical condition, framework that we are working in. I'm going to present the context of this research, which is a warehouse working environment. As you can see in the picture, on the right-hand side, you see a warehouse which is located outside of the city, quite invisible to the public. But from outside, it basically seems like a closed space with no windows and basically no visibility toward inside of the warehouse working environment. But from inside, on the left-hand side of the monitor, you see that it's actually inside is a very open space. And there's no bench to sit on, and there's no wall inside. And the reason for that, because from inside is quite open for surveillance. Although it is quite has a very physical closure from outside and quite invisible to the public. And if you want to see like actual shots of the warehouse and its working environment, I think Nomadland, a film came out in 2020, would be a nice one. And they actually shot nearly 10 minutes of the film inside of Amazon warehouse. So that's probably a good example of how it would look like. So what they use in warehouse is the normal device is the scanner, but it can vary depending on the warehouse. For instance, we know in Flash and Post warehouse in Germany, for instance, they use 3 tracking devices such as GPS scanner and a device that's attached to the trolley. But in the one that's sort of, the most common one is actually the scanner that they use to take the orders and receive the serial numbers and find the box and put it in the packet, or to send it to the delivery section. But the scanner or other tracking devices, they capture a lot of information. And so it captures the number of boxes that they carry and the number of products in each of the box. And also it captures the weight of the box. It also captures a lot of information about body movement, such as the distance that the workers are walking, the number of times the workers are sitting down and standing up, the location and movement tracking. And also it captures time management, to what extent they basically how efficient they are in terms of managing their time, how long their break takes, how long it takes for them to go, for instance, to bathroom break, etc. And in general, they have like a general sort of information about the workers' performance, depending on all of these different information that they capture. So depending on the warehouse, some of them give the information back to the worker at the end of the working day in a ranking order, sort of they can find the scanner number and see how they stand in terms of in relation to their colleagues. There's in some other cases, they receive constant feedback on the scan in terms of performance. For instance, if the break is taking a bit longer than usual, they receive feedback that you're taking a long break. You should get back to work. So there are different ways of giving feedback, but the workers receive feedback based on the information that's captured through a scanner. So what we have so far, we have the data we have so far is almost similar to a testimony. So there's a book by investigative journalist who went to a warehouse and worked there for nearly 6 months, and published the data, published the experience of working in a warehouse afterward. We also gather some online comments in the job ads or forums with regard to the working conditions. And this is not complete yet. It's in the process of gathering the data, but we have some data in that regard. We have also 4 interviews, and 1 Lebanese, 1 Syrian, 1 Iranian, and 1 Estonian interviewee. And so one of the workers was working in Germany in Flaschenpost, 2 in Belgium, Blackman and Venmo, and then 1 in Denmark, IKEA. So the employees were Amal was a full-time worker in Belgium, been in Europe for more than 3 years, had a refugee background, and was working in warehouse with another family member. Malik was a master's student working part-time in Germany, and he's been in Europe for 6 years and had a refugee background as well. And Reza, a master's student in Belgium, working part-time, and has been in Europe for 6 years. And Annika was a part-time worker, and so that was like 32 hours per week, working in Denmark and been in Europe for more than 5 years. So as you can see, a lot of them had sort of refugee and migration background, and that's very common in warehouse. So the general sort of findings we have so far is that the warehouse working environment is extremely precarious. So basically, they have 0-hour contract, no benefits, and no sick leave and paid leave. The work in Denmark was a little bit of an exception. They had paid sort of leave and sick leave, but in that case also the work seemed to be precarious subjectively, so to say, as she was telling us that basically all of the workers were overqualified. They were all migrants. Most of them were migrants, and they were lawyers, doctors, and like people with high education and highly qualified sort of degrees. And the general experience of the work was that they have a general anxiety about one's performance, a sense of being a disposable labor, and also a highly quantified understanding of the self, given the amount of the numerical feedback they get from the surveillance device. And what other sort of important things came out was that a complete alienation and dissociation from the self and isolation from the others. And I think that isolation from others would have a big implication for the way they sort of express resistance to that oppressive working environment, because there would be no possibility of sharing the pain, so to say, and also just organizing a collective to act against that working condition. There was a symbiotic relation with the tracking device, a totally automated mechanical work pace mediated through scanner. So they find the scanner actually that very useful because it does the work. It makes the work quite easier, but at the same time, it's become completely automatic that they have to do some repetitive tasks during the whole day, in order to get the job done. And also the experience of work as interrupted, fragmented moments. So that was just like give you an understanding of how the working experience looks like. But I'm going to go into some resistance strategies that we find in the warehouse working environment. So there were a couple of resistance that they found in James Bloodworth, the investigative journalist book, and it's also common to see in the interviews and an online forum. So one, we called it latent discontent, but I'm not sure if that's the right sort of title for it. So that refers to how it's basically makes people angry the way that the whole company treats individuals, and sometimes they basically try to sort of avoid the things that we're not sort of avoid the regulations, and that's kind of intentionally. So in a sense of just avoiding or trying to sort of violate the regulations on purpose. So here, this is it's a good description. The sheer oppressiveness of the place built up over time to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You soon began to fantasize about scheming against the company and its petty rules. The first time you were accused of idling, you felt a burning sense of injustice. So that's where I think he was working in Amazon, and they received notification on the scanner that you are not working enough. And so he says the first time you were accused of idling, you felt a burning sense of injustice. The second or third time it happened, you would be annoyed only because you had been caught. So in a sense that they were trying to avoid it, but then at the same time, it also give them a kind of a discontent and make them angry about the situation, which I think it's important, since we know from psychological literature that kind of negative emotions, especially being angry, is actually quite an important driver of people to do some sort of active resistance. The second one is what we can call a small rebellion. So that's a second quote from the same book, so by James Bloodworth. So he says, "You would soon find yourself carrying out small rebellions against authority. A misplaced item you would once admit, a misplaced item you would once have picked up, you now left it on the floor. You would snack in the warehouse and defile the floor with the empty wrapper, or deliver a satisfying boot to the spines of a row of tightly packed books or DVDs." So in a sense that, just not caring about the order, or just like doing something where you're not supposed to do. And he considered to be a small rebellion and give them a kind of a satisfaction by doing so. So I think that's kind of an everyday form of resistance. And what we see in online forum, I think we call it a kind of a defamation, and I think it's an important one, because what happens, a lot of the online commerce, they basically depends on the rating, and also on the way that the customers or clients sort of rate them. And for instance, in Uber, if a driver gets less than 4.5 rating, then the company actually blocked them for a few weeks, saying that, okay, you need to go through training to see how you can treat clients or customers. And I think it's an important strategy here, because they basically try to spread the word how the working condition is. So, for instance, in Indeed.co.uk, which allows users to post reviews on the job on the job ad. So, the simple search on the warehouse worker receives so it received nearly 300 reviews, and the numerical reviews it got, which is from 1 to 5, is like on average 3.2 or 3.3. So it's for work-life balance, for job security, for management, and that's, at least for the online commerce standard, is a pretty low rating. And some of the comments, I think we listed some, but we haven't done a proper systematic analysis of it yet. But we find it interesting that quite a lot of them basically try to use that defamation strategy in a sense, or sort of give a realistic account of how the working conditions are in the warehouse. For instance, here, as one was saying, Amazon living up to its reputation, generally chaotic and aggressive place. It was, I was warned about it, should have listened. And the other one was saying modern slavery, works with day contracts, and then it keeps going on, explaining the working condition. Another one was saying that worst company ever. I've been working here for 1 year and are still working on based on day contracts. So in a sense, that's the 0-hour contract that they get paid on based on the number of hours they worked. And that's basically, it can go on as long as the company deemed that they have sort of, good efficiency, good work efficiency, so to say. And finally, the other resistance strategy that we find is the possibility, the thinking about the alternative. And some of the workers there, basically, they were dreaming of unionizing. Although they find it extremely difficult and sometimes impossible, but still it did not stop them to think about it. And I think it's an important step by sort of, thinking about the alternative. What else can be there to actually collectively resist the working condition. So we asked the question in our interviews, what would you want to change about your job? So Malik, the one of the workers in Flaschenpost in Germany, told us it's a nice quote, and I'm going to read it in total. He said, "Well, if I'm completely honest with you, it'd definitely be a certain unionization of the work, which is not possible, I would say. It really needs to be huge, revolutionary ways of things altogether, and the structure has to change. But if the people would be able to come together, the substantial improvement could be possible. For one specific reason, because what happens is that this sort of job doesn't care if you come or go. For example, if you're tired, you quit, and they will find another one in 2 minutes, and new people come every day. But if instead of this, the same people who are staying say, okay, we are staying, but then they got unionized, and then it would start to demand better condition, better wages, at least more breaks in between, like in every hour of labor. So something that has to do with collectivization of the worker. What then they would stop basically working their asses off and then quitting when they are dead. And then new blood is, pumped into the machinery and then forces other people out when a new person comes up. So in a sense, saying that, okay, they know what is, I mean, at least some of them realize what is needed, but then they also point out the difficulty. And he went on to say that how there are conflicts between workers, and the way it's been organized is basically atomizing workers, not letting them get into a collective. And at the beginning, we also mentioned that how isolation of workers from one another is basically one of the themes that we find in the interviews. So that was some initial results we have. So it's a work in progress. So what we find so far is that there are ways to resist, but they are mostly individual, covered, and integral in everyday working experience. There are possibility of the alternative, but then that's also, and they also realize the difficulty of doing it. So in a sense, the setting of the working environment makes the group formation or collectivization of the work basically very, very difficult. And that also has implications for resistance. So the atomized working environment, the conflict between workers, the language barrier, given that most of them have refugee background and they are from different countries, in a sense, they do not speak the same language. And I think that's also a big, big issue. In the warehouse. And there's also a lack of information about workers' rights as well. And so what we think is needed is we need more interviews. We need to also more systematically analyze the information we have in online forum. And also, I think that's basically, it's a work in progress. And I'm interested to hear what your thoughts about this. Thank you. That was all I have. So I'm going to stop sharing and hear your comments and feedback.
Thank you, Ali. Just a quick note that you can add your comments, questions, and for Ali and Amin on the Jamboard. I put in the link in the chat. You can add it to slide 8 of the Jamboard. But you can, of course, also go ahead and ask directly right here. Anastasia, your floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting work. I would like to ask you about what do you think the surveillance aspect is adding? I think that the theoretical framework it's super interesting, and this idea of like selflessness, I think it reminds me a lot of like, I don't know the word in English, but alienation, or like the Marxist concept
alienation.
of like, thank you, alienation. So we've seen this for many years after the rise of industrialization, ultimately. And I think that you point out a very important question on what are the new ways in which this will impact human subjectivity and resistance and therefore, like, I would like to know your thoughts on what is surveillance and the new technologies adding to this.
Yeah, thanks, Anastasia. That's a very interesting question. I think so surveillance of the workers is not something new. So I think that's, as you mentioned, for instance, at the beginning of the 20th century, there was the Taylor model of time management. So, and that was basically the implemented in a lot of the industries. That's okay. In order to, when you reduce the working hours, then you increase the efficiency of people during the time they work, and by efficient time management. What is, I think, different in with the use of surveillance device? I would say two things. One is that a lot more information is captured by the tracking device. And you know, before that, when the time management basically was done by a human as a sort of, you know, that a supervisor and that you can talk to, etc. But here now there's a tracking device. It basically captures how many times you go to bathroom, how long does it take, and even like, you know, how many times you sit down and stand up, everything else. So there's like a lot more information captured by the tracking device. And the other thing is that there's no direct supervisor in a sense that would tell you whether you're doing good or bad, in a sense that you should basically adjust your own working pace, your own performance based on the information you receive from the tracking device. What is different here, I would say that what Zuboff would call the cult of entrepreneurship, that the will of the worker was used. So in a sense that the person should be willing to sort of, you know, modify his or her own behavior in order to sort of, you know, optimize the performance in a sense. And so part of it depends on the precarity of the work. So at the beginning, when there was like this time management, Taylorian time management, I don't think the working pace was as precarious as it is now. So there were sort of longer contract, permanent contract. But now is basically, in order to get the contract renewed, you need to have a proper performance. And in a lot of the cases, they receive contracts on weekly basis or on daily basis. So that's one thing, and the other thing is that the use of the worker's own will in order to manage their performance. There's no direct supervisor, and the information was fed back to the workers, and they have to use their own will in order to manage how to do it, how to further sort of, you know, modify their behavior and increase their performance. I think that's, I would say, there are two differences. So there's like the context is different, and also here the behavior management is mediated through a sort of, you know, technological device, which is tracking device, and then I think that's an extra element in here. So that's as much as I can say. Is there anything else, I mean, you want to add?
Sorry, you mean me? If I want to add something?
I mean, so okay. He was, yeah.
No, I'm fine with this question, but we have a lot of questions in the, I think that link that they provided. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anastasia, was that an answer to your question, or do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I think it's an answer. Absolutely, I agree with you that because it made me think of like what would be then the fact that you are not relating with a human supervisor. What can be the changes in terms of like affective processes, for example, or like if
Mm,
that impacts in a way the fact that you don't have a supervisor that is human, if that kind of comes back to you and dehumanizes you,
yeah,
you cannot relate for the good and for the bad, in the sense of like
yeah,
probably some human supervisors have been really mean and
yeah,
incentivize precariousness in ways that I don't know are very
yeah,
malevolent, but still the fact that it's a human maybe has an impact in subjectivity as well
yeah,
in the affective processes. But so yeah, super interesting.
yeah. I
thought
think
provoking.
that's a very interesting point, because what, to our surprise, some of the workers actually did not find the tracking device as sort of, annoying or sort of, problematic. In fact, one of the workers told us that he actually likes it because he wants to know how was his performance during the work. And I think that's part of it also to do with the way that we use. For instance, people uses the smartphone or smartwatch to see how many steps they take on daily basis, or people uses. I think there's an element of choice for a lot of the tracking devices people use, but there's no element of choice. But also there's an element of, they want to know how they do. And what is what becomes an issue is that actually that tracking device becomes a sort of enforcing what the management wants to do, in a sense. And I think that's we are still trying to find what is this, how they relate themselves to the tracking device. And some of them, there's just like we had a mixed results. Some find it actually useful, they want to know the information, and some actually find it like extremely troubling. So one of the workers was telling us that how sort of and he has like this crazy relation to the tracking device. It's almost like after going out of the work, he feels like he's sort of the device is attached to his body, and then he almost like has this kind of paranoid that he might be followed, and then he also has dreaming about like he's been followed all the time. So in a sense that it becomes like quite paranoid about it. So there were quite different reactions to the tracking device itself. But that's an interesting question, so to say. So it's like really hard to see, but it becomes a tool that actually once serves the interest of company. That's for sure. Yeah. Any other question?
Thanks a lot for this very interesting talk. I've been wondering is well, I'm like really interested in the union part of the story, and like undertaking this collective resistance towards this oppression. And I was wondering whether you plan on maybe interviewing some union activists or like union members or union like leadership in some warehouses, because I believe that, for example, there is this huge movement of Amazon unions and the whole action Make Amazon Pay and all this. I really believe that there is like a huge potential of getting interesting data from this side.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question. So the warehouse in Denmark, they have actually unions, but they do not know about it, and partly because they are most of them are immigrants. They basically don't know the system yet, and also some of them might be also a little bit hesitant, saying that okay, we have to pay in order to be a member of union, and it's already a minimum wage, so it's not enough. So in a sense, so that's one thing. And the other thing is that we actually contacted the unions also in Belgium, for instance. Amina is basically communicating with the union in Belgium, and they sort of, in order to put us into contact with some of the union members of and those who are member of their houses, are working in warehouses, and we are in plan of interviewing some. But it seemed like the whole recruitment process is going very slow. And so it's basically very hard to reach out to people. So I think that's then that's part of it. So one, we are in the process of interviewing some, and the second is that a lot of them are not member of the warehouse of the union. So like in the few warehouses that we had interviewees from in Belgium, for instance, and Germany, basic majority of them, so basically up to 90%, they are migrants and refugees, and either they don't know about the union, or they don't know the workers' right, or basically they kept into the dark, you know, so to say. So they don't receive a proper contract to see what rights they have, and it's just like a system of the 0-hour contract. It's, yeah, they have to go to work when they receive a call. So that's, I think, the funny thing about it is that you don't have a paper or fixed working hour. So the day before they receive a call, can you come to work tomorrow? And then they have to go and work tomorrow. So in a sense, it's extremely, they have to be on the call all the time. And in a sense makes it difficult to actually organize it, saying that, okay, how long I'm going to be staying here? Should I be a member of union? Should I do something about it? It's just seems like questions that someone would ask when they have a stable job, right? So I think that's the difficult part. But I think, yeah, that's all I have to say. I mean, we are trying to get unions involved and interview some of them as well. But so far it's proved very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess it would be also like very interesting for the unions to see, because I guess it's at least all over Europe, and we're also seeing this in the union where I'm active at, that we have like more and more migrant workers, but they like suffer from like very specific problems regarding unionization, and also unions don't fully like have idea how to tackle that issue, how to organize migrant workers. So I guess that would be like a very interesting thing. And also, if you'd like, I have some contacts with people who are engaged in Amazon unions in Poland, but there is like very tight network of different Amazon unions all over Europe. So, and not only Europe. So I guess we could talk about that also.
That would be
later.
great. Yeah, we'll definitely get in touch with you to see if we can sort of, you know, talk to them and interview them about that. So there's a movement to unionize, and what is interesting, like there were, I think, nearly 300 Amazon employees in the US. They were basically actively trying to unionize, and all of them got fired. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that there's also a division between who becomes a member of union. Like in Sweden, I think we wanted to do interviews, but then at the end it didn't work. So there are, I think, so there's a clear division between who can be a member of union, and they basically don't care about the part-time workers. And what the interesting strategy that some of these warehouse the sort of, you know, companies they take is that they don't employ them full-time, so they cannot be a member of union at times. So in a sense, like in Sweden, there were 1,500 part-time workers, and the union didn't care about them. And all of those part-time workers, they were migrants. And the interviewee we had from Denmark, she was working there for a year and a half on 32 hours per week, and was considered as part-time. And then also she was not sort of, you know, I mean, that comes with the idea that, okay, to what extent the part-time workers has the right as much as the full-time worker. So I think they have a lot of tricks to get around, like to minimize the power of the union to influence the decision-making process, and also the warehouses, they don't involve and they're not transparent about the contract and everything else, and with the workers, so they don't know what rights they have. And yeah, but that's good. I'll definitely get in touch with you about the union contact. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I guess there are some questions on Jamboard.
Okay, yeah, I can read a couple of them. What were participants?
some notes about some of the interventions, but there's a few extra ones.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, what the participants' view on why or how it was unlikely but vulnerable people, overqualified migrants that were so often working in these environments. Yeah, that's okay. As much as I understand the question, I think the participants' views about this, it's actually a tricky question, partly because they are refugees and migrants, they might have like different experiences, especially for refugees. So the reference group that they compare with probably might not be the reference group in the local country. It might be, for instance, somebody coming from a war-torn country and then saying that, okay, yeah, my situation is better than people in my hometown. And that might be that they might not be so unhappy about the situation in the warehouse. I think that's one thing, and I think that's something that a lot of these gig economy, sort of to say, the entrepreneurs, they are basically using that efficiently. For instance, in the James Bloodworth book, it says that, for instance, wherever there's Amazon warehouse in the UK, there's basically no local community members who is working in the warehouse. And so in a community where basically the rate of unemployment is more than 30 or 40%, no local member is working there, and only they bring sort of migrants from Romania and elsewhere to work there. And among the migrants, the general perception is that this is something that the locals won't do. It's something that's for us. You know, it's too sort of dehumanizing, degrading that the no locals would take on jobs like these. I think that's also the general. So there are two different ways. One is that the reference point might be different. They might sort of consider themselves comparison to their own sort of, comrades or sort of, the members in their hometown. And the other is that there's actually sort of something that they know that the locals won't do this. It's a basically dehumanizing job. And that's also increased the tension between the locals and the migrants. That's the other issue that we saw among some of in some of our interviews. Yeah, if there's a follow-up on that question, happy to. Yeah. Okay. Okay, what are the ethical considerations of uncovering everyday micro-resistance in such surveilled and oppressive conditions? Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand the question, but what we are interested is that actually it's a form of labor that we don't know much about it, and we don't know basically the influence that it would have on the workers. And given that, I think that's one issue, and the other issue is that actually a lot of the workers in gig economy, they are basically invisible to the public. You know, that's, as you saw from the warehouse pictures, basically outside of the work, and also they are not visible to they're not in direct contact with the customers, and they're not visible. So in a sense, by talking to them, it makes it, I think it gives them a little bit of visibility, I would say. And some of them who are active and they want to unionize, they are basically, at least the ones, for instance, I see from bicycle messengers, they are very happy to talk to journalists, and in a sense they get a voice. But so that's, I think it's important to hear their voice. At least that's the methods we have. But if you mean something else with the question.
That was my question. So yeah, I just was wondering, like, if you weren't concerned that in such a repressive, kind of oppressive place, that uncovering these tiny ways that people are rebelling might give these corporations ideas about how to be even stricter in terms of the ways that they are failing or enforcing.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I haven't thought about it that way. I mean, that's also the case with any kind of, uncovering any kind of resistance, right? It doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point. So I think there was one thing that came out lately is that what they do is actually unethical. So in a sense, and there was actually a recent ruling in France where the court decided that tracking all of this information from the workers is actually not legal. So there's the Amazon warehouse is now in a legal challenge in France with the court that this is actually what they do is unethical. So I think uncovering it is basically might actually sort of show some of the unethical ways that they engaged in. But I see also the risk that saying that, okay, how workers resist, they might actually sort of give a little bit of more ideas to the companies to actually control the workers a bit more.
I mean, the implications might be different in different countries where
Yeah.
regulations might differ. So they might,
Yeah.
as multinational corporations, they might apply some of these things differently in the United States than they would in France, for example.
Yeah. And also, I don't think it's something that is unknown to the companies, and not in warehouse, but I think in like care work. Some of these online platforms where they recruit people for the care work, they actually get a sort of signed letter from those who are sort of starting to work that they have to promise that they would not be a member of union, in a sense that they know that if they become a member of union, then they would demand a better working condition and etc. And sometimes when they also give like 32 hours work per week, is part of the idea is that they don't have the full right of or full support of the union, because they know that the union would care more about the full-time workers. So in a sense, some of them is basically known to the companies. I think they also have their own internal research. But it's something to think about. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. You mentioned briefly conflict between workers. What kind of conflicts arose? Any shared grievances or okay. I think so that's the conflicts we saw was not shared grievances. They are basically know how and the working condition, but because they've been put against one another, they have to be in conflict with others, because if their rating goes down in comparison to their colleagues, then they might not receive a call back to go there to work. So they are in constant, so there must be, in order to renew the contract, they must be in constant competition. And I think that's basically the idea that Zuboff was saying, that, okay, atomize individuals in constant competition with one another. And what happens is that in some cases you see some of the workers, they get angry at each other, saying that, okay, I can't take the trolley, as often as I want to, because you were not fast enough putting enough boxes in there, and my rate is going down, for instance. So that the kind of a conflict that might arise would be something like this. There's also a kind of a language barrier that they can't talk to each other, and then there's a lot of misunderstanding. And the other issue is that there might be because it's a very precarious working condition. Any kind of and they receive punishment if their rate goes down. Punishment in a sense that they don't get called back, and they receive reward if their rate goes up. So some of the reward was like something like, if you're performing really well, you're on the top, then you might receive, for instance, Netflix subscription, or instead of a weekly contracts, you might receive like 3 months contract, and that creates quite a bit of tension. It's saying that, okay, who is actually getting the bonus? So that's the sort of conflict. I don't know if is there anything else? I mean, that we are.
Yeah, I think sometimes, because this competition between them and the language barrier, I think the case in Belgium was like that. There was no common language at work, so they were like immediately people were talking to each other. Some people were speaking in Arabic, so they were only talking to each other, although the communication is minimal. And then people who spoke some, one language of Africa, they were together. So it was some division, I think, based on the interview, based on country of origin and the common language. And then when, for instance, they see the reports and they know, okay, that somebody else worked more, then there is this competition as a result of the internal organization of work. And sometimes they translate it to, ethnic background of themselves.
Yeah.
Because there is actually there is this grievance coming up from the internal organization of work. And sometimes I think it can be possible that they translate it to other factors.
Yeah. Okay. So in a sense, the division of the division of the labors into different tasks is based on ethnic lines as well. Sometimes, yeah. You wanted to say something, Fuad?
I was just saying it, so it comes through as stereotyping and sort of prejudice in the workplace on a collective basis as a result of this individual competition.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, I think they are pretty efficient in using that in order to control. So creating conflict and competition in order to control the workers and prevent any kind of solidarity among them.
Okay, any last questions? We're almost out of time. So any last questions before we wrap up? Okay, thank you very much, Ali and Amin. That was really interesting. If you can, please take a few minutes to put in any takeaway points you'd like for Ali and Amin to have in the Jamboard, or any feedback for us on the session format or suggestions for the future, or how to modify it. You can add them to the Jamboard again. If you haven't signed up for our listserv, if you'd like to get notifications for future sessions, I am putting in links now. You can see the schedule on our blog page as well. Oh, damn it. And to look ahead and to see recordings, you can also use the blog site. And we're also looking for presentations, so if you are interested in presenting, please feel free to do that. I will put in as well a link for that in the chat. Any last comments that you wanted to add, Ali?
Sorry, can I ask a question, Fuad? Yeah, the thing is, I don't know if I'm the only one, but sometimes I cannot enter to the webpage of the psychology of resistance. Like it tells me something like it's I don't know, it has like a fire blog or something that I cannot access. I am the only one. Do you know if there's a way I can solve this? Because I would like to read the blog spot and I don't have access to it.
Yeah, so some firewalls do block it because it's a sort of Blogger has this issue generally. I think I've found that if I am trying to use it with sort of my university computers, it won't let me do it. Especially if I'm trying to access the link directly from within email or something like that. But if I use a different browser and I type in the address in the search bar, it does work that way. And it works also better if you're not using a university machine or network.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry about that. I don't really know why that is the case, but I've noticed the problem as well. All right, thank you everybody, and hope to see you again in future sessions. We can stop recording now. Thanks, Ali.
Thanks a lot.